one of the things that people in Wichita remember, and not so much a positive thing about the Wings, are the Save the Wings campaigns. And so in Wichita in the 80s and 90s, there were several Save the Wings campaigns where basically the team was like, we need to get X number of season tickets by this date or the team's going away. And so there would be wing-a-thons on television, and they'd go out and people would sell as many season tickets as they could. And this had left a bad taste in the mouth of some people here in Wichita because they got tired of these campaigns. But one of the things I think I learned from writing this book was that I thought, well, the team, these were desperate times every time they had a Save the Wings campaign. But, from our interviews, I kind of got the feeling that maybe these Save the Wings campaigns weren't always quite as desperate as the team made them sound.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
Hey, gang, how are you? Thank you so much for coming back and joining us on our little rabbit hole of excursion into the world of forgotten sports and teams and leagues and all that fun stuff, the little journey that we call Good Seats Still Available, the curious little podcast devoted to, of course, what used to be in professional sports. Another fun episode today. If you remember the Orange Army from the 1980s in the old Major Indoor Soccer League, well, you know that I'm referring to the little team that could, called the Wichita Wings. Yes, Wichita, Kansas, aiming higher than its relatively small market-sized roots and joining the top echelon of Major League sports, and in particular this amazing, fun, and exciting league called the Major Indoor Soccer League. The Wichita Wings were quite something. They were a standout. They were, if you will, kind of the almost like the NFL Green Bay Packers type version of Major League indoor soccer. And the gentleman behind telling and remembering the story of the Wichita Wings, and it's one that's just chock full of fun stuff, are our guests today, Mike Romalis and Tim O'Brien, who are authors. They are film producers, and they are also just super fans of the old Wichita Wings of the MISL. They also played in the successor NPSL in the 90s as well. The boys have written, Tim and Michael have written a book that came out in the spring of last year. It's called Make This Town Big. It's a great title. Make This Town Big, the story of Roy Turner and the Wichita Wings. And the book has been so well received. It is being now translated into a documentary film. I don't know what the title is going to be. I don't think I asked them, but you could give a listen, and maybe we did. They are making Tim O'Brien and Mike Romalis are making a movie about the Wichita Wings. I believe it's scheduled to come out, and I forgot when they said it was coming out. Sometime, I believe, in the early part of next year. And I highly look forward to watching that. We will have a link to the promo for that video, which they just posted on YouTube a couple of days ago. But we're going to be talking all things MISL and in particular Wichita Wings with Mike Romalis and Tim O'Brien here on the big podcast in just a couple of seconds. Stay tuned. It's really fun. We talk about people like Kim Ronfed and Eric Rasmussen, and there's a little bit of Crazy George in there. Everything Orange Army. We talk about Roy Turner, the coach, of course. It's all good stuff. Give a listen in a couple of seconds after I regale you, of course, with a promotional message from our friends at Audible. If you haven't been browbeaten by me yet to be submissively convinced to go try out Audible for yourself, please do so. It's an awesome service. Audiobooks are good for the soul. They're certainly good for the ears. They're good for the mind. And there's no better place than Audible to understand the beauty of what an audiobook is all about. audibletrial.com/goodseats. That's your place to get a free audiobook download for you to try, gratis, for free. You can cancel at any time, and you will also get a 30-day trial, free trial, of Audible's service. Again, it's audibletrial.com/goodseats for your free 30-day trial of the Audible service and, most interestingly and importantly, a free audiobook download for you to listen and enjoy on whatever device that you have that you want to listen to said audiobooks. And there's, like I said many times before, there's 180,000 plus titles to choose from. I dare you not to find one that will be worth the time and the effort and hell for free at that. Again, audibletrial.com/goodseats and give it a try. We appreciate it. And so do the folks at Audible. And thank you again, Audible, for being a sponsor of our show and our fledglingness. We appreciate it very much. Okay. We are going, of course, not waste any more time, and we're going to get right to our fun chat with the boys from Wichita, Tim O'Brien, Mike Romalis, and we're going to talk about Wichita Wings, soccer, indoor style, coming at you. Well, give me some sense, guys. A bit of your professional backgrounds, what you guys do now, and perhaps how you stumbled into this story, which looks like you're further chronicling about the Wichita Wings for our audience's background.
Well, this is Tim. I had, as a kid, I had followed the Wings. Not as I wouldn't call myself a super fan, but I was a casual fan as a kid. I'm 42, so in Wichita it was a pretty big deal at that time. So I would go to some games, and then I had a Andy Chapman jersey, and I'd watch him on TV as well, both local and national television. And so I was a casual fan, and as an adult, the Wings came back in another form in 2011, and at the time I was writing for a local magazine here called Splurge, and I pitched that we should write an article about the new Wings team, and so I interviewed the GM of the team, and I interviewed Roy Turner, the great Roy Turner, who was the longtime coach of the Wichita Wings, and so it kind of piqued my interest, and so I started going to these new games of the new team, and so I really got excited about it and became a fan of the game, much more so than I ever had been as a kid, and I had known Mike Romalis since we were in high school, and then we also went to University of Kansas together as well, and Mike had been a super fan, and I'll let Mike kind of take over from there.
Yeah, my family started going. We went opening night of the 1982-83 season, and I was 6 years old, and we were playing our hated rival St. Louis, the St. Louis Steamers, and I mean, it was just a phenomenal atmosphere. Probably close to 10,000 people in the building, screaming, yelling. I had never been taken to an event like this before. I couldn't believe, my parents were taking us to this, my sister and I. But I tell you, it didn't take long for us to become, followers. We were season ticket holders. So for about the next, 10 years until the end of the MISL, I would say I probably went to about 90% of the games. And it was just such a big part of my childhood. Of course, like many kids in Wichita, I played youth soccer, and so the Wings were a big part of that, and they were just sort of our version, I guess, of the Kansas City Royals or New York Yankees or whatever it may be, as far as our sort of local heroes. So,
and so Mike and I would watch old games. Back in maybe 10 years ago, Mike has a collection of a very large collection of Wichita Wings games that he's put on DVDs over the years, and I remember one day just asking him, I was like, well, somebody ought to write a book about all this, and then all of a sudden we were writing a book about it.
Yeah, it turned out we were a pretty good team. We both brought our kind of our strengths to the project because, years ago it dawned on me, it was such a great story. The Wings were such a big part of Wichita, yet nobody really had talked about them much anymore. And so, Tim's a good writer, and he had a very good way of, organizing the book and editing the book, and I had, sort of the historical background, if you were, and I still had a lot of my programs and media guides and yearbooks and newspaper clippings. So we had, almost everything at our disposal. It was just a matter of, getting the ball rolling, so to speak.
And that ball was got rolling about, I would say it was a 1.5-year process from the first, when we decided. We had a couple friends of ours that I had been working with in a soccer fan organization, local organization that was promoting soccer of all kinds in Wichita, and they had urged me to write this book. And so we met initially with Roy Turner and Kim Runfed, the great Wings player from Denmark, and said, hey, we want to do this, and will you support this project and help us? And they were, very enthusiastic about it. And so it was basically, I had written for a number of different publications over the years, but short form, magazine articles, stuff that's a lot shorter than, I'd never written a book before. And so it was a little daunting at the inception, but as we began to interview people and get started, it all just started to come together. The book almost kind of wrote itself in a way, and we had it was a 1.5-year process from the first meeting with Kim and Roy to the publication.
And the book that we're referencing came out in May of last year, 2016, called "Make This Town Big: The Story of Roy Turner and the Wichita Wings." And that book obviously has birthed another project, which you might want to let our audience into that I know about, but is not yet fully realized. But what are you working on now as a result of that book?
Well, the book came out, like you said, in May of 2016, and was very successful locally here, and we were a bestseller in the local market for most of the summer, and we sold a lot of books on Amazon as well, all around the country. And but we had we'd always said when we started, while we were writing the book, we were like, God, I wish people could see this. And so we, in the back of our minds, we had this idea of Wichita Wings, the movie. And so I happened to, I went to a premiere of a documentary film called Out Here in Kansas, which is about sexual preference in the heartland and the Bible Belt. And it was anything to do with soccer. But the guys who made it had made a fabulous film. I went to the premiere of it. A guy named Adam Knapp was the director of this film, and his cinematographer was, or director of photography was a guy named Kenneth Lynn, and another man named John Pick also was a producer of the film. And I went to Adam at the end of the premiere, and I said, your next movie should be about the Wichita Wings. And so over the course of the next few months, I kind of wine and dine him a little bit and said, try to convince him this was the thing to do. And he had, luckily for us, been a fan of the team as a kid, and he had been a reporter for the Wichita Eagle, reporting on sports for many years, and then had kind of turned into this documentary filmmaker. And so it was just a perfect, match. And so for the last, since about May, we've been shooting various interviews and various creative shoots becoming this documentary about the Wichita Wings in the 1980s. And it's a really exciting project, and we have a teaser trailer we just put together. We're about to release it to the public here in the next few days, and I think people are it's very high quality, and it's going to be a really amazing film.
Where is that going to be? Because obviously this is going to probably air in a couple of weeks, so by the time that this airs, it'll probably be out there if you happen to know where it is now, or will be.
The teaser trailer we'll put it out on YouTube, and you'll be able to access it by we have a Facebook page, Wichita Wings, the movie. Also, we're on Twitter and on Instagram, and our Twitter is, I believe it's Wichita Wings Movie, and then the Instagram is ICT Wings Movie. If you just search for Wings Movie, you'll see all this social media stuff pop up on Google, and so we'll put that link out there when it comes out, and the film itself will not be done. We'll probably be releasing it September of next year, so about a year from now. I'm guessing. It's hard to say, but we're traveling we have some trips we are going to interview Andy Chapman in Michigan, and the great Andy Chapman, a forward for the Wings, who many MISL fans will remember. He had played for Arsenal as a 17-year-old and came to America and became a star here. And then Terry Nickel was a great midfielder for the Wings, and he's in Ohio. And then we're going to fly to Denmark and to England this summer and interview a whole bunch of guys, former Wings that are out there. So it's quite a project.
There's a GoFundMe page for this too. Wink, wink. If I need to ask.
Yeah, Wichita. Yeah, the GoFundMe. If you just search for Wichita Wings movie at GoFundMe, you'll see. I believe it's actually GoFundMe.com/Wings movie.
Well, look, it's a testament to you two not being the only ones interested in remembering the story and trying to document it. But let's maybe get to the beginnings of that, right? So it's clear, both in the book and the way you've set up this film as it comes together, that one of the seminal people involved in it, from which the story centers around, is Roy Turner. Do you want to give our audience a bit of a sense of how the club sort of got going and Roy Turner's part in that startup?
Well, let me just give a little bit of his background, and then I'll let Mike kind of go into the how he came to Wichita. But Roy was from Liverpool. Was born in World War II, during the Blitz, and grew up in Liverpool, and eventually played as part of the Everton system in what is now the Premier League, and so he had eventually made his way to America and played for the Dallas Tornado in the old NASL, North American Soccer League. And Roy his nickname was the Digger. He was basically specialized in getting the ball. And once he could get the ball from the other team, then he would distribute it to guys like Kevin Cooley, another great wing, and other players that played for the Dallas Tornado. And Roy was known as the Iron Man of the NASL. He played a huge number of games in a row, and was very good at just getting the ball from other teams. And so as his playing career came to an end in Dallas, he was very involved with getting the kids in Dallas to become soccer players, and he'd go around to schools and all over the place, attempting to grow the game. And so then, what happened then, Mike?
Well, Roy's career was coming to an end in about 1978, and consequently in Wichita, youth soccer was starting to grow. There was a guy named Tom Marshall, and with respect to Roy Turner, Tom Marshall is really the true founding father of the Wings. Tom was he was from upstate New York, so he was from a pretty soccer-heavy area, and he came to Wichita in the 70s. And he had a son who was playing youth soccer, so Tom got involved in AYSO as like a commissioner. And as participation grew, they realized, we need some more fields for all these kids to play on. And some land became available in East Wichita, and in order to, fund the purchase of this, he staged a fundraiser in the form of a an exhibition game at our newly built Kansas Coliseum between the Houston Hurricane of the NASL, which at that time had Kyle Rote Jr., and of course the Dallas Tornado, which Roy, he had just finished his career, but also had players like Kevin Cooley. And so they had this exhibition game on December 1st, 1978. And they brought about 5,800 people to the Coliseum for this, and it was just kind of a big day of soccer anyway, with clinics, and it ended with the game. And then Tom staged another exhibition a few months later between Chicago and Tulsa, and altogether these two games brought in about 10,000 people. So Tom said, well, maybe there's something here. Maybe, this is a good market to have a professional team. So he started, making calls and trying to make connections. And eventually, the original plan was for the Wings to join the old American Soccer League, which at that time was an outdoor league, but they were looking maybe to make an indoor league. Well, that didn't happen, but of course, the MISL had just finished up its first season, and it was looking to expand. And so between Tom's persistence and the backing of a guy named Robert Becker, they were able to establish a franchise in Wichita. I don't know. The story kind of sounds like the MISL wasn't real keen on a city the size of Wichita joining, but I think seeing that, they had there was
real money involved.
And people know how, they just couldn't say no.
We interviewed Doug Verb for the book, and Doug had been the director of the press relations for the MISL, and he was like, well, we saw Wichita as, it's like, well, they got the money,
yeah,
and so let's see what they can do, and that's Bob Becker had been, he was in the oil business, and so and like a lot of, in Wichita, if you have a lot of money, you probably got it from oil originally, and because this is kind of what was an oil country, and so Becker had basically put the money forth for the team and was the majority. Most of the money was from him, and they made Tom Marshall his general manager, and which led to a lot of controversy that first year, but it led into that first season for the Wings.
What was that controversy? Because there was kind of a shakeup just before the season started, it seemed.
Right. It was the week before the first game, so we're talking Thanksgiving week of 1979. And at that time, Tom was, his title was general manager, but about a week before, he was let go. Well, I guess it kind of depends on whose story. Some say, he was let go, or maybe Tom resigned on his own volition. But needless to say, they thought that maybe, at least Becker thought maybe too much money was being spent and not enough tickets were being sold.
There was a personality conflict, I think, between Marshall and Becker, and Marshall, I think, resented the fact that Becker had sent in another his attorney, whose name was
Ward Lawrence.
To basically kind of watch over Tom Marshall's shoulder while he was running the team, and there's a big controversy then about I think Tom had made a statement to Bob Becker or to Ward Lawrence about how if he didn't get X, Y, and Z, then he wasn't going to be the GM anymore. And so Becker said, "All right," and then said, "That means you just resigned."
Yeah.
And then they were arguing, and over in the Wichita Eagle had articles about one side says this, the other side says this, and Tom Marshall says I didn't resign, and I was fired, and Ward Lawrence and Bob Becker said no, it was the opposite, and but in the end, Marshall was out the door, and it was a week before the beginning of the season, and they still had a woman named Jackie Knapp, who was the PR person for the team. And then so they had to go forward, all of a sudden with with a whole new team, or a whole new group of people trying to put this team together. Except for Jackie Knapp was the only person that was kind of left on from the first group of people. So it was a inauspicious start, and so a man named Ray Denton was brought in to sort of head up the operations of the team, the nuts and bolts of the thing. And but they actually had a pretty good amount of success that first season. And
on the field, they had a very good year. And Roy Turner at the helm. I mean, he was the soccer guy, and he was very easy to work with. And so consequently, the field operations were great. So.
Well, there was that, you kind of hinted at it. I mean, Wichita, obviously not the largest market in the country, right? And the MISL,
right,
at that point, coming off its first season, only had 6 teams. Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious as to like who reached out to whom first. It seems like perhaps that maybe Wichita kind of put itself on the radar before, say, the MISL was looking at Wichita, per se.
Yeah, I mean, after the potential deal to try to get the Wings into the American Soccer League, after that fell through, I mean, the MISL was the next obvious option. And knowing that the league was looking to expand, especially to the Midwest, because most of the teams were in the East Coast, Mid-Atlantic, as well as Houston. But they put teams in Detroit, they put a team in St. Louis, and so geographically, Wichita was good. But again, given Wichita's size, we were always kind of more of a minor league town. Minor league baseball. We had Wichita State basketball, but we didn't have, a history of any kind of major league team like every other city of the MISL did at that time.
Yeah, the Wings were the first major league team in the history of the state of Kansas. Mm-hmm. Of course, the Kansas City Royals, the Kansas City Chiefs were in Missouri. So, it was Kansas's first actual major league team of any sort. And like I said, I think the league was like, well, since they have the money, let's see what they can do. And then it became, the Wings sort of became, and I don't know who exactly was the first to make this comparison, but they basically became the Green Bay Packers of the MISL. They were the little town in this big league with. When you go down the list of teams in the league, New York, Baltimore, Philadelphia, St. Louis, Cleveland, Chicago, Buffalo, these are all NFL franchise towns. These are all NBA franchise towns or, Major League Baseball towns. And Wichita, of course, was, really stuck out in that way. But despite that lack of size, and in fact, I remember Jackie Knapp said that when they were pitching it to the MISL, the MISL had said, well, we need to have X number of people in the metro area. What was it? I can't remember what they said.
About 500,000.
And so Jackie was like metro area. So she decided, she drew a really big circle around Wichita to include, some towns that are, an hour away. Yeah. and if you push it, at the time you could find 500,000 people in a really large metro area, within, 150 miles of Wichita. But, so it was a bit of a stretch, but the Wings, when they shut down in 2001, were the longest running soccer franchise in the United States.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, look, I think that speaks to, and I think our previous guest, Michael Menchel, was kind of hinting at it too, that there were a number of markets, either because of struggling NBA or NHL franchises, or in the case of Wichita, the non-existence of any other major league sports franchises, especially during the winter season. It was literally the only game in town, and in those environments, it made for an unfettered presentation and almost love affair with certain fans and certain markets. And I think Wichita clearly was one of those.
Oh, absolutely.
One of the most fascinating things I think is that, at that time, Wichita had about 200,000 people, 250,000 people in it, in the city itself, maybe. I mean, and there were 9,000 people going to Wings games the same night there were 9,000 people going to Wichita State basketball games. And so you had this real, it was an impressive show of support for what at the time was actually Wichita State basketball. Actually, at that time was doing very well. This would be during the Xavier McDaniel era and
Cliff Levingston
era. But
sure.
And so they were, Little Wichita was, filling up two different arenas to capacity on weekdays sometimes, or weekends as well, supporting, a lot of, a significant portion of the city was in either Henry Leavitt Arena or the Kansas Coliseum on certain nights of the year.
Well, we'll come back to the fans in a second, but I want to kind of just maybe tie a bow around this first season because I guess back up question: did the fans come out in droves during that first season? Was that a challenge?
It took a little while.
They had to paper the arena for a while. There's no doubt about it. But as the season progressed and as the team, the media was very good. They had good coverage in the paper. And so I think people came out initially as a curiosity. Maybe they'd get free tickets or something. Were the attendance figures somewhat elevated a little bit, maybe a little off? Probably. But overall, people gradually started coming out.
And I think by season 3, you had there were about 4 or 5 seasons there in the early mid 80s, later in the 80s as well, where they were basically averaging near capacity at 9,000, over 9,000 people a game, in the high 8,000s a game. And so, but yeah, it did take a little bit, but one of the big breakthroughs for getting the attendance up was a game against the San Francisco Fog, which eventually became the Kansas City Comets, right, Mike?
Yeah.
And but the San Francisco Fog had a player named Mancini, who was a bit of a hothead and also a former amateur boxer. And he got into it with Jürgen Christensen, the great Danish player who played in the Bundesliga and then came to the Wichita Wings and was a star for the Wings and the MISL Passmaster. And he ended up getting punched out by Mancini during a game that happened to be televised by, I believe, by Cake TV, right, Mike?
Yeah.
Here in Wichita, and that game was shown, I think, on tape delay.
Yeah, it was shown after hours, and this was in the second season, incidentally. But Roy Turner, he made the point in the book that it was after that game, that's when attendance really, really started to spike, and this was relatively still early in the season.
So yeah, this is 1980.
Mm-hmm.
And so, all of a sudden people see this and they read the articles in the paper about, John back and forth between the San Francisco GM and Bill Kentling in Wichita. And so it was a big controversy and people were all amped up about it. And like Bill Kentling said in the book, he says, I loved it when there were fights. It was great for selling tickets. And so, that had happened, and then at the end of the first season, the Wings got into the playoffs, and they won was it a play-in game, I believe, and who was it they played, Mike?
Well, this goes back again to the first season. It was a one-game playoff, quarterfinal against the team Detroit Lightning, and the Wings literally won it with no time remaining on the clock, and on a goal by Omar Gomez. So that really, and they had very good attendance at that game as well.
Yeah, but it wasn't enough though. I guess to convince Becker to continue past that season. Maybe you can give a little hint as to the drama, perhaps that bookended the start versus the end of that season.
Becker actually announced that about midway through the season. In fact, it was an interesting day. It was February 25th, 1980. He released the press release that he was not going to fund the team anymore. And it was such a letdown because the previous day, the Wings had just won a very exciting overtime game at home against Philadelphia. That was also the same day that the U.S. Olympic team beat Finland for the gold medal. So then you have this big letdown that Becker decides, I've lost too much money, I will see it to the end of the year, but if you guys want it, you're going to have to find a new backer because this is just not making financial sense for me.
The league was really not happy about this announcement. They thought it was I believe Doug Verb said it was a amateurish move, basically, and what are they doing? Announcing this ahead of time, and I think the idea, I think Becker's idea was that, hey, I'm going to try to see if I can drum up interest amongst people, somebody in Wichita to buy this team from me. And all this is so through the last part of the season, you have all this drama of will the Wings come back? And this was really the first Save the Wings campaign, essentially, and so you had an effort to try to find people that were willing to buy the team from Becker. And so the Chamber of Commerce here in Wichita, kind of put forth an effort to look for investors, and they ended up, having like a telethon, and they ended up finding an important person in Wings history, and that was Frank Carney. Frank Carney was the co-founder of Pizza Hut, and was from here in Wichita, and where Pizza Hut was founded. And he, along with Jim Hirschberger, who was in the oil business, and a number of other wealthy people here in Wichita, put money in to buy the team, and Frank Carney became the senior partner of that group. And they purchased it from Bob Becker, and Becker had lost $500,000 that first year. So, but it was the people of Wichita, I think, came out enough at the end of the season that convinced these people that this was something that was worth investing their money and their time in.
And with his arrival, basically a clean out of the of senior management as well, right?
Yeah, most of the people that had seen the Wings through that first season, they wanted to make the organization as good as it could be. So they wanted to bring in kind of some name people. So that started with Bill Kentling, who had also worked at Pizza Hut. He was in promotions and in sales, and so they brought him in as the general manager,
which is probably the best move they could have made, because Kentling was a genius at promotions and generating buzz, and he was great at putting quotes in the paper that were fiery and would generate controversy. Yeah. And
before we go Kentling for a second, he actually became somewhat even more involved in not only the team but the league down the road, right?
Yeah, he eventually, after being GM of the Wings from 80 to 86, I believe, he became the league commissioner, MISL commissioner, and was the commissioner for a 3-year term.
Yeah, so that's a seminal moment actually for the league itself, which obviously you got to give credit to Carney and his group for in the second year of the team.
Right. No, and it was kind of even slow going the second year because they had received a lot of pledges, going into that second season for tickets, season tickets. Well, those pledges didn't always turn into sales. So consequently, attendance was pretty sparse the first few games into the 1980-81 season. And, leading up to that infamous game against San Francisco, I think there were already whispers like, if people don't start coming out, we're just not going to be able to fund this again, because you said you wanted it, now you're not coming out, so which is it? So after that San Francisco game, attendance did pick up. And so consequently, they had some, I think they had maybe one sellout or near sellout through the rest of the season.
And then, in the next few years, it began to, grow to the point of, Wichita got used to selling out or near selling out, every game of the year.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. So the, as a young kid growing up in the New York metropolitan area, clearly watching those games on the USA cable network with Al Troutwig and Cal Rote Jr., those games in Wichita were, I'm trying to figure out the right word here, electric, I think.
Yeah.
You felt that it was, it felt smaller. I believe the field itself was relatively smaller compared to those of other arenas, and it was just no doubt that the sound and the passion in that building, every game that was nationally televised was palpable.
Well, the people of Wichita started to all of a sudden realize they had this thing of their own, this professional sports team at a major league level, and you could go out and go to a game, and then after the game you could go have a drink with the guys at a bar called the Hatch Cover, and you could meet the players at summer camps, and the players might even remember your name, and the Wings became embedded in the community. And this was Wichita was a pretty blue collar community. It was aircraft manufacturing as the base of the town's economy, and so you had all these aircraft workers who were traditionally football, basketball people, baseball people, embracing indoor soccer. And then you had the elite, the city's elite at the games. You had the middle class. You had single women going to the games with their girlfriends. You had the whole town of all these different demographics, Hispanic people as well, coming to the games because it was a big deal for Wichita, and all these different the city came together to come to these games, and because you felt like you were a part of the team, and so people were very enthusiastic, and that the fan base eventually got Ray Turner coined the term the Orange Army for the fans who would come out and orange everything, and so I think that atmosphere you're describing was a product of that feeling of ownership that the people had over the team that often was literal, because it wasn't all Frank Carney. It was a lot of different people had invested small amounts of money in the team as well, which is yet another reason why it was the Green Bay Packers of the Major Indoor Soccer League.
Okay, friends, sorry for the interruption. Just wanted to quickly remind you that today's episode of Good Seats Still Available is brought to you by our friends at Audible, the premier provider of digital audiobooks with over 180,000 titles to choose from in just about every genre you could think of. Audible titles play on iPhone, Kindle, Android, and more than 500 devices and MP3 players for listening anytime, anywhere. And for a limited time, my audience can listen to a free download of any book that they choose, as well as get a 30-day free trial when you go to audibletrial.com/goodseats. That's audibletrial.com/goodseats. And you can choose from over 180,000 titles, as we said, including one that I'm listening to right now. It's called The 10-Gallon War by John Eisenberg. That's the story of the NFL's Cowboys, the AFL's Texans, and the feud for Dallas's pro football future. Another one on my list, which I have yet to download but is on my queue, that could be interesting to our audience here, is called The National Forgotten League by Dan Daly, entertaining stories and observations from pro football's first 50 years. Those are just two of the many thousands of titles to choose from, and not just in sports history, but you name the genre that you might want to listen to, and Audible's got it. By the way, two guests perhaps that we'll have on the show, hopefully sometime soon. But again, go to audibletrial.com/goodseats for your free 30-day trial, as well as your free audiobook download to try it out for yourself. Again, that's audibletrial.com/goodseats And now, back to our conversation. Well, let's talk about some of the play on the field, right? The Wings were always competitive, especially in for the vast majority of the 80s, right, until maybe near the end, as 87, 88, they didn't qualify. But they were always in the playoff hunt, and they never kind of quite got over the hump. But no doubt they were entertaining, right? And no doubt they were competitive, and quite a few all-stars on these teams that Roy Turner assembled.
Oh, without a doubt. The quality of the play, I mean, Roy Turner played a very European-style game, pass, pass, pass. The Wings were always considered a very beautiful team in that sense compared to, our hated rivals, the Steamers, who were just a bunch of American animals, So the Wings, yes. I mean, they qualified for the playoffs nearly every year. And as you said, there was always a hump that they couldn't get past, whether it was St. Louis or San Diego, one of the other, teams that were at that time, the class of the league. But it was always very competitive, and we had some of the best players in the league. The Wings had, these Danish all-stars. The Wings just had kind of this pipeline from Denmark and turned some of these guys into, players who were almost just built, almost made for the indoor game, given their foot skills and their passing skills and their shooting and their sense of the game. Kim Runford, I've always thought he was kind of the Bobby Orr of the MISL, and that he could just do everything. He was a great athlete. He could run like the wind. He could shoot. He could score. I mean, he was a defender, so he kind of ran the game on the field, and he was a leader and a captain. And so he was obviously just the heart and soul of the franchise for years. And that of course extended later on to guys like Erik Rasmussen and Jurgen Christensen. And then, of course, later on, Chico Borja. So we had just some of the most electrifying players in the league. Unfortunately, we just I don't know what was missing to finally get past that hump. But you know what? There were a lot of very good teams in the MISL at that time, but even they couldn't beat San Diego.
And I think it did stick in the craw of Roy Turner that he never got to a finals, and of course he and Kevin Keeley, Kim Runfed all feel like they should have gone to the finals in 1981 when the Wings played the Steamers in the semifinals, and that year the league had a Final Four format where the top four teams played in St. Louis for the championship series in semifinals and finals. And unfortunately, the Steamers made it to that that Final Four series in St. Louis, and so they were playing on their home field, and Wichita was up by quite a bit earlier in the game. Was it 7-1, Mike?
The Wings were up, by about 4 goals going into the fourth quarter, and they were just completely outplaying St. Louis. And up until this time, St. Louis had generally beaten us, but this was so odd that we go into their building. There's 17,000 people plus at the old Checker Dome, and all of a sudden, we're turning them inside out. But they didn't quit. The Steamers did not quit, and they staged this amazing comeback, and they tied the game with about a minute to go in the game. And it went to an overtime. Nobody scored. And in those days, if no one scored in overtime, they went to a shootout. A one-on-one against the goaltender, you had 5 seconds to score. And the Steamers ended up winning in the shootout, actually on a penalty kick. I guess the feeling is, at the time there was thoughts that, the referee, he didn't call maybe some obvious fouls against St. Louis. Maybe St. Louis got away with some plays that they normally, they shouldn't have. I guess the idea was, they wanted just to let them play.
And that, at the halftime, that was I think Roy Turner thought that the league had went to the refs and said, look, just let them play. Yeah. And then the second half was Mike Deller got injured in a very questionable play by Steve Petra, I believe.
No, it was Don
Ebert, sorry. Mm-hmm. And so the Wings reserve goalie came in and it was to this day Cooley and Turner believed that they were robbed, and in fact we wanted to film that. Well, I'll just put it like this: they won't watch that game ever again. They won't look at it. They refuse to see it. So
yeah. It was a very, very crushing loss, and St. Louis ended up, of course, playing New York for the championship a couple days later. New York ended up winning on a goal, of course, by Steve Jungle. But even New York, I mean, they wrote a very nice letter to the Wings fans that was printed in the local paper, basically saying, you guys, you played a very good game, and we kind of feel maybe you got robbed as well. But
it's a touchy subject.
Yeah, I mean,
in Wichita.
But so. I'll tell you, it was still very good for the league. It was a very, they never played that kind of format, that Final Four format again, because the idea of it being a neutral site, yet St. Louis is in the playoffs. I mean, that's silly. But as somebody was quoted later in an article written about that game, it was just a great weekend of soccer, and I think it did do a lot to help promote the league.
And that game became known as the greatest MISL game ever. Yeah. I mean, in fact, the MISL magazine, the magazine of the league, had an article. I think that was the title of the article, "The Greatest Game Ever."
Yeah.
Well, obviously, clearly, St. Louis was doing gangbusters. In the stands, and it was that was a phenomenon, and you can easily see why the MISL and its ascendants would look at an environment like that to hold its quote unquote neutral situation.
I mean, right? It was the league was a blank slate in those days. I mean, they were just kind of making things up as they went along, in a sense. But you had to promote it, and so you just tried different things, and so.
Well, we got that sense with our guest, Michael Menchel, and I guess this sort of leads me into a question which I'm sure is on certain people's minds. Did you ever, based on your knowledge and your conversations with folks involved, and maybe your remembrances as fans growing up, did you ever get the sense, either real or imagined, that perhaps the league didn't want to see such a small market like Wichita succeed? Hint, hint.
Well, I think that, again, I think that they would have not preferred to have a city like Wichita. I mean, it was called the Major Indoor Soccer League. We never were a major league town. But again, we proved them wrong. We showed that we could do it. We had the great support. We had a great building. We had great fans. I mean, we mentioned the Kansas Coliseum. Yes, it was the smallest arena in the league by numbers, but when you had 9,800 people in a building with a concrete building with a low roof, well, yeah, it may as well have been 98,000 people. So, our fans were sort of the seventh man on the field. But, I think later on, Wichita proved again and again, despite its financial difficulties, that the team was wanted in Wichita.
And you can't blame the MISL for wanting large markets to do well in the to be in the championship series. New York, obviously the biggest market there is, and St. Louis is obviously a much larger market than Wichita. So. It made sense for that the league would want to have big market teams, and because the league was wanting to become, the fourth biggest league in the country, behind NFL, MLB, and NBA, and
the NHL. Don't forget.
Well, no, but they were ahead of the NHL, I think, at that time. You know,
in certain markets they were, and the NBA for that matter.
You know, they were wanting these big national television contracts, and they were on USA, and then they were on ESPN for a little while as well, which eventually they lost that contract, and that became, I believe, the NHL's Friday night game on ESPN. But so yeah.
So coming to the middle of the decade, right? That's when sort of the next sort of big, sort of sizable shift in management and arrangements for running and coaching the team sort of happened. Do you want to kind of walk our audience a bit through the lead up and the follow out from that? I guess it's circa 85, 86, 87, right?
Yeah, going into 1985, 86. Let's see, that was the last year Roy Turner was the coach until, he later on. The summer of 1986, I guess Earl Foreman, he was just going to retire. And so Bill Kentling became the league commissioner. Bill really wanted the job. He felt that, more or less quoted saying that he didn't feel like the league was marketing itself well enough. It wasn't, it wasn't where it could have been. So.
And there was an interim figure between Foreman and Kentling.
Yeah, Frank Dale was the 85-86 commissioner, and then Kentling went in 86-87, and then so Roy Turner moved up to the presidency of the Wings, and then they brought in the great former player Charlie Cook to be the coach of the Wings.
Bonnie Prince, they called him in Scotland.
Yeah, so this kind of, like you said, kind of started the next change, the next shift in the history of the Wings.
And that transition also involved the ownership of the Wings because at the same time, Frank Carney stepped down as the main shareholder, the senior partner for the team, and it was taken over.
We're getting into an era by Bill Oliver, and Bill Oliver, he's a local attorney, and so he had been involved with the team at an ownership level going back to even the early 80s, but by about this time he became sort of the managing partner among many, many other general partners and limited partners. So the Wings, they were owned by many, many people in those days. They really had to kind of spread the risk out by then.
But this one seemed to be a bit more stable than, say, the previous change in ownership, right? Which sounds more crisis-like.
Yeah, this was a very smooth transition. It was really just, Frank Carney wanting to step down as sort of the senior person and become, he was still, I believe he still had ownership, partial ownership of the team. He just decreased his equity, and then Bill and Mary Lynn Oliver stepped up and took over that role. And so it was, but you had all this change going on at the same time. You had the senior partnership changes, then Kentling goes to the MISL as commissioner, and so then Turner, can't be coach and GM, so he becomes president of the team, and Charlie Cook comes in to replace Turner. And Charlie Cook's assistant was Norman Piper, right, Mike?
Yeah, Norman Piper had, he was one of the great original Wings, the first player, in fact, signed by the Wings. And after he had retired, he'd become an assistant coach. So. And
around this time, and also somewhat stably, a player you hinted at before with pretty big impact across the league for a number of years is Hernan Chico Borja, former Cosmo.
Yes, Chico came to Wichita after the Las Vegas franchise had folded in the summer of 1985. And Chico, he had played for the New York Cosmos. He was an Olympian. He played on that kind of ill-fated Team America NASL team. And but he had an immediate impact he could, again, great athlete. He could score. He wore his passion, on his sleeve to a fault sometimes, because sometimes he would take penalties at not great moments of the game. But he added just a great level of excitement and got people, literally on their feet. And
like a lot of Wings who came to town to Wichita for the first time, Chico, he was not necessarily super thrilled to be coming to play in Wichita. Which most of the guys who came here didn't really know anything about Wichita other than it was in Kansas, and they imagined it would probably be a lot of farms and things of that sort. And so Chico comes here, and he gets to town at night and is taken to a hotel. And the next morning he wakes up, opens the curtains, and there were cows outside of in the field outside his hotel room. And he thought, "What have I gotten myself into?" Which was the reaction of a lot of the guys that came to Wichita. First thing they come here and they're like, "Oh, this, many of them are." Andy Chapman comes here from Southern California, and then other guys are coming from other major cities, and all of a sudden they're in Wichita, and it's a little bit of a letdown, comparatively to the bright lights in the big cities of wherever they had been previously. But what ended up happening is that a lot of these guys fell in love with Wichita because they just fell in love with the people here. Sometimes literally, married local girls, and the fans were so great here, loved the players so much, and so they were rock stars in Wichita.
Right.
They were when Andy Chapman put on those leather pants and went out on the town. It was he got everybody's attention, and it was a special time for Wichita, and Wichita made these players feel special because we showed them the love. Whenever the team would fly back to the airport after a road game, there'd be Wings fans at the airport to greet them every single time. There was never a time that I think it was Kevin Hewley said he could not remember a time that they didn't get greeted at the airport by a group of fans.
Yeah, win or loss, they were there. So
yeah, I mean, it's pretty amazing too. You also look at the attendance numbers. You mentioned in the beginning a little sort of hard to get the kindling caught, if you will, if you want to strain a fire analogy. But this was a team that for the most of the 1980s. Largely filled the building, almost 10,000 people per game, 8,000, 9,000 on a season average. I mean, it was clearly a love affair between this city and this team for quite a long time that even extended, perhaps on a more muted level, to when the league itself ended as the major soccer league for that 1 year. And the team went to the indoor NPSL, which itself had been a challenger league under another name, and for another decade or so. I'm just curious as to what you guys attribute that sort of love, passion, interest, fandom, I guess, between this city and the sport and or this team in particular.
A lot of it is the genius of Roy Turner and Bill Kintling to go out into the community and seek out fans and seek out people. When Roy Turner was in Dallas, he and his coach, the second coach, Mike, whom
Al Miller.
Al Miller, yeah. They just went out and they just stormed elementary schools and high schools, and were constantly going out and talking to kids. And that's what Roy brought with him to Wichita. He came to my elementary school when I was in elementary school more than once. The players came out and demonstrated their, soccer skills. And, they were going out in the community. You could meet them at the bars out, at the official, post-game parties. And, they were just on commercials and local commercials in town, and they were just everywhere. They even one season they even had cars from the local Subaru dealership, and on the side of the car had this Wichita Wings emblem and then the name of the player. And so the players are literally driving around in Wings cars with their names on the sides of them, and they were just ubiquitous around town. And And so because Wichita, realized all of us, hey, we're competing with New York, we're competing with LA, we're competing with Chicago, all these big cities that, Wichita couldn't find their name next to New York ever before that. And so this competition made people very proud. This is a Wichita thing, and it brought all these different kinds of people together to support the team. And in my opinion, indoor soccer is a thrilling sport to watch in person. It's an exciting sport. It takes all the things about soccer that Americans usually don't like, low scoring, offsides. It gets rid of those things, and it brings in these things that Americans do like, which is, lots of scoring, lots of action, fast pace, theatrical introductions, all these things that the MISL brought to sports here in America. And so the people of Wichita were just entranced by this. And Wichita had, all these foreigners, guys from England and Denmark and Argentina and Germany and elsewhere come into town, and naturally the local people were excited about these people with these funny accents, and that added to the intrigue and the interest of for the local people. And you could run into Roy Turner at the supermarket, and he'd talk to you, and the same with the players. So it was an intimate fan experience, sometimes very intimate for some of the local ladies in town.
Well, and speaking of which, we also have to mention, of course, the Wings had the Wichita Wings Angels. That was the cheerleading dance troupe, and they were, I think they were they were ambassadors for the team as well. And so, if you're a single guy, you're not going to mind, meeting some of those girls as well. So.
Although the kissing booth, that was a mistake.
Yes.
They had at one event, decided to have a kissing booth with the Angels, and we interviewed some of the Angels, and they particularly did not enjoy the man with who had the chewing.
Yeah, Skull Man or
Skull Man. They kept coming back for the kissing booth, but yes, it was an intimate fan experience, and in ways that larger cities couldn't replicate, in the sense that you couldn't go hang out with George Brett in Kansas City, you couldn't go hang out with Reggie Jackson in New York, but you could hang out with Andy Chapman and Kevin Cooley and Kim Runfed and all the guys here in Wichita. So that led to people felt like, in fact, one of the fans was interviewed for a marketing video for the team at a game, and he says, this isn't Roy Turner's team. This isn't Bill Kentling's team. This is my team. And that encapsulates why the Wings were so popular, because people felt like it belonged to them.
Right. And it was affordable. They always wanted to make the tickets affordable. And, maybe it wasn't great for the bottom line for the Wings, but they really never raised ticket prices all that much. And they wanted to, make sure that families could afford to go to the games. And so, you'd go to the game and you'd grow up. You'd literally grow up, with some of the people in your section.
So in putting the book together, and obviously now in the process of putting this movie together, obviously you were fans. You clearly understood and experienced what it was to be a Wings fan during those times. But have you learned anything in the book and or in the process of doing this movie that came as a surprise to you, or that you did not know about during that time? Or do you want to save that for the debut of the movie?
I learned a lot more than Mike did, in the sense that Mike was a super fan. I think Mike didn't know the actual dimensions of the players' waistlines, but no, just kidding, Mike. One of the things that I found interesting was when the Wings. One of the things that people in Wichita remember, and not so much a positive thing about the Wings, are the Save the Wings campaigns. And so in Wichita in the 80s and 90s, there were several Save the Wings campaigns where basically the team was like, we need to get X number of season tickets by this date or the team's going away. And so there would be wingathons on television, and they'd go out and people would sell as many season tickets as they could, and this had left a bad taste in the mouth of some people here in Wichita because I got tired of these campaigns. But one of the things I think I learned from writing this book was that I thought, well, the team, these were desperate times every time they had a Save the Wings campaign. But, from our interviews, I kind of got the feeling that maybe these Save the Wings campaigns weren't always quite as desperate as the team made them sound. And I think essentially what they were it was a way for the team to measure the community's support, because the people that were funding the team were willing to go spend more money and lose money again next year, as long as the people of Wichita were willing to come out and buy season tickets and go to the games. And there may have been a bit of theater involved in some of these Save the Wings campaigns where it wasn't quite as desperate as they made it sound. And so that was something that I did not realize. And that is I would say maybe not everybody would agree with that statement, but I think if you really got to the bottom of it, I think that might have been the case. Mike, what about you?
Well, they made the numbers known how much they had lost. And, I mean, they lost a lot of money. I mean, we're talking, 30 years ago when they're saying, we lost $607,000 or $700,000. Well, maybe in the world of professional sports now, of course, that's minuscule. But in those days, I mean, that's, the equivalent of well over, $1 million now. I don't know. Again, revenue streams were relatively, you just didn't have that many. I mean, like I said, they didn't really ever raise ticket prices. You had your advertising revenue. You had maybe some merchandising revenue. There was really little TV money. I mean, indoors, it was just a very, very expensive thing to put on. I mean, you're paying these world-class players really what they should be getting paid. I don't know.
Did you learn anything, Mike, from writing this that you didn't know?
I was trying to think about that. I'm sure I can't think of anything off the top of my head, that really knocked my socks off. I guess honestly, even when I was researching, even in the old newspapers, I guess one thing that was interesting to me was the fact that the Wings were originally conceived as an indoor-outdoor type franchise. I had never seen that written anywhere in any of the old publications. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that it's interesting or important, frankly, to understand sort of that time in American soccer history, right? Because during the 1980s, as the NASL overexpanded, floundered, and then ultimately collapsed in '85, right? You had in its wake, some decidedly minor league soccer franchises, but nothing near the allure and the stature of the NASL. And the major indoor soccer league literally was the only soccer game in town, an indoor variety, right? And it was everybody was sort of writing off the sport of outdoor soccer as boring and foreign and it's tedious and all that kind of stuff. And yet you had this amazingly alluring and tantalizing product on the indoor circuit, and fans just ate it up.
Right. As outdoor soccer has finally, gained solid footing in this country, I like to think that at least one contribution we've made, to soccer history is that realization that for about close to 10 years, indoor soccer, it was the only legitimate professional way to play soccer in the United States. And
it's I think it's hard for people to realize now how big indoor soccer was at that time. I mean, Chico Borja was left the Wings after the '86 season, I believe it was, or '87 season. I can't remember now. But he was signed away by the LA Lasers, who of course were owned by Jerry Buss, owner of the LA Lakers. They signed Chico Borja to a 3-year, $1 million contract in 1987 or '86. That's a lot of money, and it's especially in today's dollars, that'd be even more money, of course. And guys in Wichita, Kansas were making $100,000 a year in 1985 money, playing for the Wichita Wings. Not every guy, but Kim Renfed, the top level guys at that time in Wichita, were making around $100,000 a year to play indoor soccer in Wichita, Kansas, which is pretty remarkable. And it just goes to show that the MISL was a legit league with very top level talent. And I know the guys, Roy and some of the other players, feel like that the talent level of the MISL was actually better than the talent level of Major League Soccer now. They felt like the Wings could beat a lot of these MLS teams now. And
I'll tell you,
I can't speak to that. I'm not a good enough soccer expert to tell you whether that's the case, but that's what Roy Turner thinks.
Well, I'll tell you look at some of those old clips from some of those MISL games, and they were intense and skilled, and So I guess two sort of wrap up, questions here as we segue to conclusion. Number one, do you think the phenomenon of the Wichita Wings and/or high-level, top-caliber indoor soccer comes back at any time in the future, and can it go, or was it kind of a once-in-a-lifetime kind of thing? And then number two, any residual effects, I guess, from the Wichita Wings experience in relation to where soccer is today? I don't notice yet a team, let's say in Wichita, in the Division III USL or the Division II NASL or any of that. Unless I'm missing it. What roots were left, and what is the future of soccer in the city?
Well, I think to take your second part first, the impact of the Wings in Wichita on soccer was profound in the 80s, in the sense that you had every kid, not every kid, but seemed like every kid going out and playing soccer. Wearing Wings uniforms. Those kids grew up. Some of them became Wings later in the 90s at the end of the franchise. Some of those kids went on to play in Major League Soccer. Many of those kids are now running soccer teams here in Wichita. There is an outdoor team in the new NPSL, which is the amateur semi-pro league. It's called FC Wichita, and it's composed mostly of college players who play here in the summer. And but yeah, you're right. There is currently no soccer team, professional soccer team in Wichita. The city of Wichita actually is probably about to build a baseball soccer stadium downtown. Yeah,
there was actually just an article in our paper just the other day about the potential of getting a Division III
USL team. Yeah, that is the scuttlebutt is that we're going to be getting a AA baseball team and then a USL team, and I think that would be very good for the city. And in terms of indoor, the Wings came back in 2011. A local businessman named Wink Hartman, who's also in the oil business, like the original Bob Becker, owner of the Wings. But Wink Hartman brought the Wings back for 2 years, and the successor MISL league, MISL number 3 or 2, I can't remember how many of them there have been now. And then there were 2 more years of another team called the Wichita B-52s, which were in the MASL. And, I think indoor will probably return to Wichita, but it's hard to imagine indoor becoming what it was back in the 1980s ever again. It's hard to imagine that level of play and big deal that it was then, partly because of Major League Soccer. But there are people who are trying to make that happen. And you look at, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the futsal leagues that are being planned right now, but I believe Mark Cuban has money in the one of these futsal professional leagues that Keith Tozer, I believe, is the person in charge of. And supposedly it's coming to NBA markets in the next year or two. Now, obviously, futsal is not the same thing as indoor soccer as we're used to it. But of course, the court, they use a basketball court, and it's smaller than the MISL arenas were, and or smaller than the fields were, and they don't use the boards. But I think indoor soccer can become something again, but something more than it is now. But I doubt that it could ever become what it was in the 1980s, just unless there was some sort of collapse of Major League Soccer in America.
Yeah, I mean, there will be a place for it. As long as you have players, you'll have a place for indoor soccer. I mean, the MASL, it still exists, and there are franchises all over the country. But if you're wanting to be a player, if you're wanting to play pro as a living, I mean, obviously MLS that's the ultimate goal now.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, the success of MLS and all the things that sort of came before it, and we can argue whether, it's still artificially supported and should there be promotion and relegation and all that kind of stuff. I mean, those are separate topics for a different time. But, make no mistake, there is a stability to the outdoor game or the classic game, right, that clearly did not exist in the 80s, has eluded, this in this country for quite some time. And, but to your point, I think it's extremely important, whether it comes back as futsal or there's another variation of it to come, or the MASL, and its relative, unevenness, I guess, across the franchises that comprise that. One thing when the National Soccer Hall of Fame comes back online physically next year in Dallas, or just outside of Dallas in Frisco, I remember going there a couple of times when it was in Oneonta before they sort of went dormant for a number of years. There was nothing really even alluding to the indoor game, whether it was the NASL variety or the MISL. And
there were always people in the soccer world who resented indoor soccer. They resented the success of indoor soccer in the 80s because they felt like it was a bastardization of the sport. And once Major League Soccer began to become powerful and eclipse the indoor game, they were more than happy to bury indoor soccer. They didn't. There were people who never liked it because, it wasn't the game that was being played around the world. And I think that's unfortunate that there were people with that mindset, because indoor soccer should have a place and I think in a perfect world, indoor soccer would be a off-season place for players who were playing professional outdoor soccer to play in. But that has sort of become very difficult because the Major League Soccer season seems like it lasts 13 months every year, and it's a never-ending season that has very little off-season in it, and of course those teams are not willing to let their players play in another league in the indoor league in the winter. But you have seen USL and NASL players playing both indoor and outdoor in the last 10 years, and I think it would be a perfect scenario for building indoor soccer as this off-season league that guys can play in to hone some of their skills. But you run into the problem of owners not wanting guys to do that. But that's why you have some teams. Cedar Rapids, Iowa has an indoor team and they also have an outdoor team in the summer. And so it's for second division soccer that is a good idea, I think.
Well, it's also probably a way to allow professionals to stay professional completely without having to do the side job thing and all that kind of stuff. And look, this is what the NASL, and you hinted at before, the old American Soccer League, were kind of envisioning, sort of this indoor and outdoor thing. I mean, we had Terry Hansen on a couple episodes ago, who was part of the Atlanta Chiefs, and he regaled us in stories about how outdoors, at the Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, 55,000 seats, and they were maybe drawing 5,000 or 6,000 if they were lucky a game. Yeah. Yet when they switched to the indoor season, right, they sold out the Omni time and time again. So regardless of sort of where you fall on this, I mean, to deny that the Wings, the MISL, the 1980s, early 90s, was not part of the building blocks that supports a robust and still growing professional soccer environment in the United States, largely on the outdoor side. I think that has to be rectified. And perhaps
I hope
your movie comes out at that time.
That the Hall of Fame is going to be in Dallas. Maybe, there will be a push to recognize the old MISL, because, of course, Dallas was a great franchise. The Sidekicks were a great franchise for years, Tattoo and everybody. So I would really hope that, if for no other reason, the location, we could get the MISL recognized in the Hall of Fame.
Well, the timing of your movie coming out sometime next year, I think, would be very appropriate. So we'll try to keep that. We'll put a pin on this conversation, and maybe some of our vaunted listeners who have some pull in soccer history and the Hall of Fame, et cetera, we might be able to sort of make something happen. But before we run, guys,
sure.
I want to thank you. This has been awesome and a tremendous deep dive. Remind us again, give us some of your promotional opportunities here for both the book as well as how our fans can keep an eye on what you're doing with the film, and maybe even raise their hand and contribute something, perhaps something that eludes you.
Oh, yeah. To buy the book, you can go to Amazon.com and purchase it as a physical book or also a Kindle version. And if you're interested in donating to the film, you can just go to the GoFundMe page, which is gofundme.com/Wichita Wings movie or Wings movie. I can't remember. I should have had that written down. But and then you can follow us on Facebook at Wichita Wings the movie. We also have a Make This Town Big Facebook page as well for the book.
MakeThisTownBig.com is also, we have a website, I believe has a link.
Yes, MakeThisTownBig.com. And then our Twitter handle is ICT Wings Movie, ICT Wings Movie. And then we're also on Instagram at Wichita Wings Movie. And so any of those, I'm always on social media putting things up for about the film and about the movie, and so we'd love to have people contact us on there and interact with our pages and buy the book, donate to the movie, and follow what we're doing.
Keep the Wings memory alive. Indoor soccer memories alive.
And we have a Wings beer right now. Actually, there is a local brewery here in Wichita called Aeroplanes Brewing, which is we just came out with the Chico Beer Ha, a American wheat beer, which is dedicated to Chico Borja, the great American player originally from Ecuador, and $1 from every pint goes to the Wichita Wings movie. And unfortunately, it's not in bottles yet, but you can. So you have to be in Wichita to get it. But so we're trying to take over the world.
All right, fun times, live and exclusive. I don't know if it was live. It certainly wasn't exclusive. However, it was definitely from Wichita. Thank you, Mike Romalis and Tim O'Brien. And we eagerly await this documentary film about the Wichita Wings. And you can participate in this process. So get ready to write these down. So there's a GoFundMe page, gofundme.com/wingsmovie. So you can contribute and be part of the festivities and maybe get a little promotional item in exchange for your support of the film. You can follow the movie on Facebook at Wichita Wings the movie. You can go to their website, which refers to, of course, the book from which this movie is emanating from, called MakeThisTownBig.com. Of course, that is also the name of the book, Make This Town Big, the story of Roy Turner and the Wichita Wings. There will be a link not only on all these places to that book, but you can find a link for that book on our website, goodseatsstillavailable.com. Just search for this episode and you will find that. If you want to follow the exploits of the movie being made, you can also follow them on Twitter at ICT, the letter I, the letter C as in Charlie, the letter T as in Tom, Wings Movie, ICT Wings Movie, at ICT Wings Movie, that is, on Twitter. And on Instagram, you can also follow them too at Wichita Wings Movie. That's all one word. No shortage of places to keep up with Messrs. Romalis and O'Brien as they continue their journey into making the movie about the Wichita Wings. Again, the book as well is available now to whet your appetite while we all wait. And again, it's Make This Town Big, the story of Roy Turner and the Wichita Wings. Find it wherever good books are found. So thank you to them. And of course, thank you to you for listening. Please, by all means, keep going to our website, goodseatsstillavailable.com. If you've missed any episodes, you want to download or find supplemental information, books and movies, etc. from such, that's the place to find it. goodseatsstillavailable.com. On social media, of course, you can follow us, and please do so. We encourage that as well. We love chatting with you in that form and fashion. That's on Twitter at GoodSeatsStill. You'll find us on Instagram at GoodSeatsStillAvailable. And you will also find a Facebook page devoted to this here little show as well. Before we go, we do want to thank, of course, our friends at Podfly Productions who make this sound dandy, much dandier than I give it to them in raw fashion. But the folks, they know who they are, but let's tell the audience as well. It's David Gregerson, Corey Coates, Eric Begay, and of course, Jerry Payne, Podfly Productions. That's podfly.net. And if you need help with your professional sounding podcast needs, that is the place to go. And frankly, too, if you're thinking about starting a podcast and just are a little intimidated by the whole process, Podfly is a really good place to help you through that process. Podfly.net. Podfly Productions, the name of the company. Thank you, guys. Without you, I can't do this. And without you, the listeners, I can't do this. I appreciate your support. Your cards and letters, keep them coming, as they say. And we are encouraged and enthused by your passion for what we're doing, and lots more good stuff to come. My name's Tim Hanlon. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week. And until then, take care.